Last month, a Kawasaki H2R owner in Arizona did something that should have been impossible. He registered a 300 horsepower track-only missile for street use. It required a mirror, a brake light, and apparently a DMV clerk who'd stopped asking questions. The bike lacks headlights, radiator fans, and any pretense of practicality. Its exhaust hits 120 decibels, which is roughly equivalent to standing next to a chainsaw orchestra. And because it was never designed for emissions compliance, it's essentially a rolling environmental violation wrapped in carbon fiber. This isn't an outlier. This is the logical endpoint of a power war that's been escalating since 1999, when the Suzuki Hayabusa hit 194 miles per hour, and European regulators started making threat noises about import bans. The manufacturers responded with a so-called gentleman's agreement to limit top speeds to 186. Problem solved, right? Except they didn't stop building faster bikes. They just got creative about it. Track-only models, street bikes with prototype power figures, supercharged monsters that technically comply with the agreement while delivering more horsepower than most cars. What we're left with is a lineup of machines that are so absurdly overpowered for public roads that they've transcended practicality and entered the realm of performance art. Here are 14 sports bikes that prove more power isn't always better. It's just more expensive, more dangerous, and infinitely harder to insure. Number 14, Suzuki Hayabusa. The bike that started it all deserves recognition for unleashing this particular brand of madness. When Suzuki named their new superbike after the peregrine falcon, a bird that literally hunts other birds by dive-bombing them at terminal velocity, they weren't being subtle. The original 1999 model packed 173 horsepower into a 1,300cc inline-4 that was optimized for one thing: making Honda's Super Blackbird obsolete. Mission accomplished. The Hayabusa topped out around 194 miles per hour, which sparked enough regulatory panic that it effectively ended the top speed wars before Kawasaki could fire back with their ZX-12R. Here's what the press kit won't mention. The bike's aerodynamics came from actual wind tunnel testing, but the designer himself admitted the goal wasn't to make it attractive, it was to make it slippery. The result looks like a bloated insect, and yet that purposeful ugliness is exactly why the bike could hit speeds that terrified politicians across Europe. Fast forward to the 2022 refresh, and Suzuki still honors that gentleman's agreement. The new bike makes 188 horsepower, but somehow accelerates from 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. 0.2 quicker than the old model, despite less peak power. That's the engineering equivalent of saying we've optimized uselessness. Because when you're electronically limited to 186 anyway, shaving 0.2 off your launch time just means you reach illegal speeds slightly faster. Number 13, BMW S1000RR. BMW's first legitimate superbike arrived in 2009 and immediately made everyone else look lazy. The S1000RR pumped out 193 horsepower and featured electronics that actually worked. Revolutionary concepts at the time. It won every comparison test and established BMW as a serious player in a segment previously dominated by the Japanese. Here's the problem. It was too good. The bike handled impeccably on the street, which meant riders could actually access that power in real-world conditions. Previous leader bikes required skill and commitment to ride quickly. The S1000RR made going fast feel easy, which is how you end up with YouTube compilations of S1000R owners discovering that traction control has limits. The current model makes around 205 horsepower in standard trim. That's enough to pull the front wheel in second gear if you're aggressive with the throttle. For context, Hunter S. Thompson once wrote that a Ducati with 80 horsepower was too fast to ride at speed in normal traffic, unless you were ready to go straight down the center line with your nuts on fire. The S1000RR has 2.5 times that power and is marketed as an everyday sport bike. The disconnect is stunning. Number 12, Yamaha YZF-R1. Yamaha's flagship sport bike has been a performance benchmark since 2004 when it introduced its cross-plane crankshaft, a design borrowed from MotoGP that gave the bike a V-twin-like power delivery despite being an inline-4. The result was a motor that made around 180 horsepower but felt more tractable than competitors with similar output. Which sounds great until you realize tractable power just means you're more likely to use it. The R1 is friendly enough at legal speeds that riders forget they're sitting on something that can hit 100 miles per hour in first gear. That accessibility is precisely what makes it dangerous. The bike doesn't demand respect through intimidation. It just quietly waits for you to get comfortable, then reminds you that physics doesn't care about your confidence level. The 2025 model adds Brembo brakes and winglets for improved stability at speeds you'll never legally reach. Yamaha's basically admitted the bike's primary purpose is track day domination, yet they're still happy to sell it to anyone who can fog a mirror and sign loan paperwork. The cognitive dissonance is almost impressive. Number 11. Honda CBR 1000R RR Fireblade SP. Honda spent most of the 2010s making superbikes that were merely excellent, which apparently bothered them enough to build this. A 215 horsepower homologation special that's essentially a detuned world superbike racer with lights. The name alone is absurd. They added so many suffixes, it reads like a password recovery question. The Fireblade SP features titanium connecting rods, electronic Öhlins suspension, and a ram air system that adds power as speed increases. It'll hit 215 miles per hour if you're brave enough and have access to a runway, because there's nowhere else you could legally explore that capability. The bike costs $31,000 before dealer markup, which buys you technology derived from MotoGP and the knowledge that you'll use maybe 30% of the bike's performance envelope during your entire ownership experience. Here's what Honda won't advertise. The first service costs around $350 for what amounts to an oil change with the inspection checklist. Tires? Budget $400 to $600 per set, and you'll need them every 5,000 to 8,000 miles if you're riding with any enthusiasm. The brake pads cost $300 and won't last 10,000 miles under aggressive use. Number 10. Aprilia RSV4 1100 Factory. Italian manufacturers have a reputation for building beautiful, temperamental machines that require more maintenance than relationships. The RSV4 factory does nothing to dispel this stereotype. It's powered by an 1100cc V4 that makes 217 horsepower, wrapped in bodywork that could hang in a museum, and engineered with the assumption that you'll have it serviced by someone who actually cares. The first dealership service typically runs around $350, which seems reasonable until you hit the 20,000-mile mark. That's when the big valve service arrives, and suddenly you're looking at $1,700 in labor and parts. One Austrian owner documented their experience online, noting that the service included valve clearances, brake work, and chain replacement, all of which are expensive when you're dealing with Italian components and dealership labor rates. The bike's electronics are genuinely impressive. Traction control, wheelie control, launch control, adjustable power modes. It's got everything you need to safely manage power you shouldn't have in the first place. But here's the thing about electronic nannies. They're only as reliable as their sensors. When your gear position sensor fails, which multiple owners have reported, you've got a 217 horsepower bike that can't figure out what gear it's in. Good luck explaining that to the tow truck driver. Number 9. Ducati Panigale V4S. Ducati took their Desmo Sedici MotoGP engine, sleeved it down to street-legal displacement, and created the Panigale V4, a bike that makes 210 horsepower and sounds like a rabid hornet's nest. The V4S adds electronic suspension, a lighter swing arm, and a price tag that starts at $35,000 before you even think about the racing exhaust. The engineering is remarkable. The Desmo Sedici Stradale engine is genuinely bulletproof when maintained properly, which is fortunate because maintenance is where Ducati separates enthusiasts from posers. The first service costs around $300 to $500 depending on your dealer's hourly rate. Oil services hit every 7,500 miles. The big desmodromic valve service doesn't arrive until 15,000 miles, but when it does, you're looking at roughly $2,000. Multiple owners report issues that fall into the annoying but not catastrophic category: quick shifter failures, gear position sensor glitches, Valve cover gasket leaks. One owner documented going through 2 engine replacements on a V4R due to oil blow-by issues, though they also admitted to riding at sustained high speeds. The engines don't last long unless you only cruise, they noted, which is a hell of an indictment for a bike marketed as a superbike. Number 8. Kawasaki Ninja ZX-10R. Kawasaki's litter bike has won more World Superbike Championships than any other current model, which is impressive until you remember those bikes share approximately 30% of their DNA with the street version. The production ZX-10R makes around 200 horsepower, features electronics derived from actual racing data, and can be purchased for $16,000, making it the bargain option in the useless power segment. The problem with the ZX-10R isn't that it's bad, it's that it's too competent for its own good. The bike handles well enough that average riders can carry serious speed through corners, which is how you end up in situations where talent can't cash the checks confidence is writing. Owner forums are filled with people asking whether the bike is suitable for beginners, which is like asking if a chainsaw is appropriate for trimming bonsai trees. Technically, yes, but there are better options. Number 7. Suzuki GSX-R1000. The Gisser has been the default leader bike choice for squids and track day warriors since 2001, when Suzuki pioneered the whole make it lighter and faster than everything else philosophy. The current model makes around 199 horsepower, weighs 445 pounds wet, and can be had for $15,000, which explains why it's the most popular sport bike in parking lots and the most common bike in crash statistics. Here's what Suzuki won't tell you. The GSX-R1000 is so competent that it makes dangerous riding feel normal. The throttle response is smooth, the handling is predictable, and the electronics work well enough to save you from most of your own mistakes. This builds confidence, which is great until confidence exceeds ability by a sufficient margin that traction control can't compensate. Insurance companies know this, which is why a 25-year-old rider can expect to pay anywhere from $2,000 to $3,500 annually for full coverage. That's assuming you have a clean record. One speeding ticket and those numbers climb significantly. For comparison, a mid-size cruiser runs around $500 to $1,200 annually. Number 6. MV Agusta F4. MV Agusta builds motorcycles the way Italian fashion houses design suits. Gorgeous, exclusive, and engineered with the assumption that someone else will maintain them. The F4 packs a radial valve engine that makes around 212 horsepower, wrapped in bodywork that's genuinely art, and backed by a dealer network that's thin enough you might need to ship your bike for service. The F4 costs around $28,000, which sounds expensive until you factor in that you're basically buying a rolling sculpture. Then it sounds reasonable. The problem arrives when that sculpture needs maintenance, because MV components don't come from the same parts bins Honda uses. When something breaks, and things will break because Italian, you're sourcing specialized components at Italian prices with Italian shipping times. Build quality is inconsistent even by Italian standards. Older F4s are now approaching 20 years old, which means those exclusive components are showing wear. Corrosion is a known issue, especially if the bike has seen winter salt. One owner manual explicitly states the bike shouldn't be ridden in rain, which is the most Italian thing ever committed to print. Number 5. Triumph Daytona Moto2 765. Triumph built exactly 765 of these homologation specials to comply with racing regulations, which should tell you everything about their intended purpose. The Moto2 edition features a tuned version of the street triple motor, making 128 horsepower, Öhlins suspension, and enough carbon fiber to justify the $19,000 asking price. Except here's the thing. 128 horsepower is actually reasonable for a street bike. The Moto2 makes this list not because it has too much power, but because it's engineered for a purpose that has nothing to do with street riding. The suspension is too stiff for anything but smooth tarmac. The riding position is committed enough that your wrists will complain after 20 minutes in traffic. And because only 765 exist, finding parts is going to be an adventure once the model ages out. Triumph built this bike to go racing, then sold the leftovers to collectors and track day enthusiasts. If you bought one to commute, you've misunderstood the assignment spectacularly. Number 4. Ducati Superleggera V4. 500 units, $100,000, 234 horsepower. The Superleggera is what happens when Ducati's racing department gets drunk and someone gives them a blank check. It features carbon fiber wheels, carbon fiber bodywork, carbon fiber frame components, and a curb weight of 335 pounds. That's lighter than most 600cc sport bikes, despite having an 1100cc engine. The power-to-weight ratio is obscene. We're talking 0.7 horsepower per pound, which puts it in the same territory as dedicated race bikes. It comes with track-only exhaust, race spec mapping, and the understanding that you'll probably never use it anywhere near its limits because there's nowhere legal to do so. Annual maintenance costs run $1,500 to $3,000, depending on how hard you ride. Insurance premiums hit $1,000 to $2,500 annually, assuming you can even get coverage. Some insurers won't touch bikes in this price range. And if you wreck it, good luck finding replacement carbon fiber components. You're not getting parts from Revzilla. Number 3. Kawasaki Ninja H2 Street Legal Version. Kawasaki looked at the entire motorcycle industry, said hold my sake, and built a street-legal supercharged sport bike that makes 240 horsepower. The H2 features a centrifugal supercharger that whines like a dentist's drill and technology borrowed from Kawasaki's aerospace division. It costs $32,000 and comes with a manual that reads like a warning label. The supercharger adds complexity that naturally aspirated bikes don't deal with. Oil starvation will kill a turbo or supercharger faster than you can say warranty claim. Over 90% of forced induction failures come from oil-related issues, either starvation or contamination. The H2 requires precise maintenance intervals and high-quality synthetic oil because that supercharger is spinning fast enough that any lubrication hiccup becomes catastrophic. Owners report the bike is actually reliable when maintained correctly, which is reassuring until you factor in those maintenance costs. Figure on oil changes every 3,000 miles if you're riding hard. Use the expensive stuff, and never ever do fast cold starts or hot shutdowns. Forced induction setups need warm-up and cool-down periods to keep bearings happy. Number 2. Ducati Panigale V4R. Take the already excessive Panigale V4S, bore it out to a full 1,100 cubic centimeters, add wings, install track-spec suspension, and charge $45,000. That's the V4R, a homologation special that makes 221 horsepower in street trim and can theoretically hit 240 with race exhaust and mapping. Multiple owners have reported catastrophic engine issues on the V4R specifically. One documented going through 3 engines due to persistent oil blow-by into the airbox, despite meticulous oil-level maintenance. The common thread seems to be sustained high-speed riding, the exact use case the bike is designed for. Ducati's response has reportedly been that cruising is fine, but pushing the bike hard leads to premature wear, which is a spectacular way to sell a race replica superbike. Service costs mirror the V4S, but everything is more expensive because of the race spec components. Annual maintenance runs $2,000 to $3,000 if you're tracking the bike regularly. Insurance is equally painful, and resale values take a hit because buyers know the bike's history likely includes track abuse. Number 1. Kawasaki Ninja H2R. 310 horsepower. Track only. No lights, no mirrors, no emissions compliance, no warranty. The H2R is Kawasaki's middle finger to the concept of restraint, wrapped in carbon fiber and painted green. It costs $60,000 and comes with explicit warnings about everything from tire warmers being mandatory to noise levels that'll get you banned from most track days. The supercharger boost is cranked high enough that the bike makes MotoGP-level power from an engine that's barely larger than what's in a standard leader bike. That level of specific output requires constant maintenance and careful operation. One owner who successfully registered an H2R in Arizona noted that maintenance intervals are much different than closed-course use suggests. Translation: if you ride it hard, it'll need attention constantly. The bike lacks radiator fans because Kawasaki assumes you'll never sit in traffic. It has racing slicks because street tires can't handle the forces involved. The exhaust hits 120 decibels because nobody bothered with sound compliance when designing a track-only machine. Everything about the H2R is optimized for lap times, not practicality. And yet people buy them for the street use, because apparently some humans interpret warning labels as challenges. The Arizona owner who registered his H2R had to add a mirror, brake light, marker light, and street tires. He insured it as a ZX-12R because the agent couldn't find H2R in the coverage database and just gave up. The bike gets ridden to bike nights and occasional weekend rides, approximately 0% of its intended use case. These bikes prove what we've known all along. More power stopped being better about a decade ago. Speaking of bikes that went too far, check out our video on 13 motorcycles that'll be illegal to ride soon, because apparently manufacturers are still finding new ways to build machines that regulators can't ignore.